Well, hello everyone. I'm Maritza Barone and welcome to my podcast, Things You Can't Unhear.
Today I want to share the learnings and journey of Aisling Quigley, a yoga teacher, mindfulness and meditation facilitator, and founder of Conscious Collaborations, a series of events for like-minded women to connect. And she also runs beautiful retreats that get people together to experience the peacefulness and benefits of living life consciously. She's a gentle and generous soul with such a beautiful energy, which makes her perfect to get you into a more relaxed and mindful state. Hi, Ash.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I already feel calmer in your presence. I said it the minute you walked through the door this morning, like I just dropped a few levels. And yeah, it's so nice to have you on the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, I'm intrigued about your knowledge when it comes to mindfulness and yoga and meditation. When did you bring this practice into your life? Is it something that you grew up around?
Absolutely not, actually, funnily. I guess in terms of my growing up, I was never really experienced or really came across yoga or meditation at all. Always, I guess, had that view that it was quite woo-woo, quite out there. Not necessarily that my family was traditional Catholic or anything like that, but I guess even growing up in Ireland, has been, and it's starting to change, but it had always been quite conservative, I guess. So the idea of yoga and meditation was still quite out there. So that wasn't really ever something that I'd dabbled in or dipped my toe in. And it was actually coming over here. So I got to Australia 7 years ago and initially came with my partner, and we were living with another couple. And one of the female of the two, she had been going to some Bikram. We were living inside Melbourne, and she'd been going to some Bikram yoga. And purely from a physical perspective, that's why she was going. And I'd watch her. She'd go maybe 2-3 times a week, and I'd watch her come in through the door, and I'd see her, and she'd be a red hot, sweaty mess. But you could not wipe the smile off her face. She was just on another level. And I was like, obviously got quite curious as to what this was. And I was like, Bikram yoga, 40 degrees, that sounds ridiculous. I could never do that. But actually, funnily enough, I'm quite a cold person, cold creature. So I got to kind of winter stage. I was like, maybe I could give this thing a go. I was absolutely not a gym bunny whatsoever. That's never been something in terms of physical exercise that I've wanted to do. So I thought, you know what, maybe this could be something I could give a go. And it was also a way to spend some time with her and, connect on that space. So on that level. So I went and I did the class with her. An hour and 30 minutes of absolutely almost dying, and felt like it was torture, to be honest, and thought, oh my God, how do people do this? It was so inflexible, the tightest hamstrings known to man, and everything, I guess, against what I perceived a yogi should be or look like. And the funny thing that happened was Shavasana came. And, that 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes at the end of class where you lie and you be still and you just meet yourself totally as you are. And after that had finished and we ended the class and I walked out and I was turned and spoke to her and I was like, what was that? That was amazing. And I felt so amazing. And it was that part that just instantly hooked me and kept me going back for more. I kind of dabbled again. I was kind of in and out of yoga, particularly as we'd moved up to Queensland for a little while and came back, but we landed actually on Inkerman Street and quite close to a yoga studio that was there, which also was hot but wasn't Bikram. And the amazing thing about that studio was there were so many different teachers, different styles. They weren't bound by the same 26 set of postures. It was an hour. It was a lot more accessible. And instantly I just fell in love. I was like, yeah, you know what, this is it for me. This is totally it. And soon found myself not just once or twice a week. I was totally addicted. I was going as much as I could. I was probably going maybe 5 or 6 times a week.
What was it about the classes that really drew you in? Because we talked about, you just touched on it quickly, that it may have been from an exercise perspective initially, but it was probably more the mind side of things that got you hooked. Can I say that's right?
Absolutely. again, from a background growing up, all the way through school, through uni, all of that, was quite anxious as a person and never really had a label for it. Really struggled, actually, particularly when I got to uni, or college, as we say back in Dublin. And I really struggled with sleep. I'd find myself up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, up for 3 or 4 hours, wide awake, buzzing, not knowing what it was, just thought I couldn't sleep very well. But now, I guess, and however my journey, can look back and see that it was absolutely anxiety. I was totally crippled with it, was having frequent panic attacks. Again, didn't know what it was, but would find that I just wasn't really coping very well. And I think at that time, again, didn't really know what it was, but it was that time and that space to leave the world behind, leave it all at the door, leave all the to-do lists, the what might happen, the what has happened, and just actually be, and just be there and have time and space to be with me and to drop into my own body, to drop into my own breath. And as a byproduct, naturally, that did calm the mind. And so leaving, I guess, leaving the class then, it was that was basically the beauty and the power of the practice, which I didn't know what it was at the time. I just knew that I needed more of it in my life, and that's what led me to coming like 5 or 6 times a week. So totally became obsessed, and a few years later, it came up that a teacher training was happening, and I'd maybe only been practicing about 3 years, maybe 2 even, and thought that I couldn't possibly do this. You know, people who go and do teacher trainings have been studying for years, and, you know, they have all of this practice, and of course they can all stand on their head and, you know, all the usual things that people think of and perceive of. But I just was so hungry for more. I just wanted to know so much more about this practice and where it came from, and different teachers that I would have had over the different times would have shared different aspects of it. And I think that's why I find it such a beautiful practice, because there are so many facets to it, whether or not it's physical, whether it's spiritual, whether or not it's more the philosophy kind of side of things. I loved all of it. I absolutely loved all of it. And I wanted to learn more. And that's what led me to this teacher training. And eventually something within me just said, you know what, just do it. Just absolutely just do it. So the teachers in the studio were very supportive and never made me feel like I had enough experience or anything like that. So I said, okay, I'll sign up. And I remember actually on that note, the very first day, and we all sat around in a circle and we shared our name and, you know, a bit about ourselves. And I was probably one of the last to go, and everyone turned around and was like, yeah, I've been practicing for 10, 15, 20 years. And I was dreading getting to the part where I'd have to share. And it got to me and I was like, oh, Aisling, I've been practicing 2 or 3 years or whatever it was at the time. And from that moment, that was the last point that I ever felt like I wasn't good enough, or I shouldn't have been there, or I wasn't validated in some way, because it is such a personal practice and you take from it what you need and what resonates best with you at any given time. And to find that space where you could just allow yourself and show up exactly as you are, however that is for you. And to have a space like that and to be able to connect in, and then all of those magical benefits that come with it, you know, as you roll out the mat and all the way through to when you leave and walk back out through the door, that was actually just the magic of it all for me. So, that's, I guess, what got me started.
You really seem to have found your calling because you came from more of a corporate background, didn't you? And
I
you're
did.
Happy to just leave that all behind and move into this world of calm and sharing your knowledge and your power behind this amazing practice. Now, yoga, I've dabbled in it, and it's something that I've always wanted to be obsessed with. And it's something that I'm still going to interpret. I've made a lot of changes in my life, and that's on the list to be next. But there are so many types of yoga and so many different forms. How do we choose what's best for us? Is it just trial and error? What do you suggest?
I think that you've hit the nail on the head there. There are so many different types and forms, and I truly believe if it is something that's calling to you in your life at any stage, there is a facet of the practice or a form of practice that is absolutely for everyone, and that's really the beauty of it. With yoga, I find conversations that I have a lot with students is actually to that regard, because like that, we all have these very clear perceptions of what, and limiting perceptions, I guess, about what we perceive it to be, you know. And unfortunately, I feel the world of social media has been an amazing thing, and it has been a really tragic thing, particularly in the yoga space, because in one way, it's seen more, you know, and I think people get curious about it and they ask questions about it. But also to that regard, there's what's portrayed on social media. A lot of it is amazing, beautiful looking women who blonde hair, blue eyes, size 6, that are on a beach doing a headstand on a stand-up paddleboard, you know, whereas that's not how everyone is. And I think that also puts up a barrier for it for people, because they all straight away, it's seen as this, I guess, otherness, as in that's not me, you know, and that's not the practice for me because that's for them, or that's, you know, for the people who I see on my screen. So in terms of the practice itself, amazing things are studios, in that, particularly in Melbourne, we're so lucky to have so many amazing studios around, and often they offer introductory offers. So a very easy access to entry, which is quite cheap, which usually is for, 2 weeks, 30 days to try a number of different styles and different teachers to see what resonates with you and your body and your mind, because also what you might resonate best with you might not necessarily be what resonates with your best friend, who you might decide to sign up for the trial offer. It is such a personal practice.
I've been to a few yoga classes with friends, and I actually think I prefer to go alone, because you're sort of tempted to interact with your mate who's sitting next to you, but it's like you keep saying, it is such a personal experience, and just zoning in your mindset into that conscious reality of time, I think is, it's nice to do alone. I really believe that. Yeah. So what type of yoga do you teach in particular?
I teach a few different types. I come from the type of yoga that I guess I prescribe to, or I've learned, and the traditions that I have learned from have been, every sort of yoga at the moment is hatha based, and so I have come from that space. A lot of the teachers that I have learned from recently, particularly, have been more tantra based.
So what are the differences between the two?
Hatha is kind of the grandfather of it all, and within hatha there are many different types of lineages, so Tantra, specifically, when you hear that word, you often think of, I guess sex, because that's what people think of, but it's not based around that at all. It's seen as, I guess, a science between things like breath work, things like meditation, things like mantra, and also the physical practice. To I guess, backtrack a little bit, yoga also, what I think is very important to speak to is that it's not just the physical shapes that we make with our body, and that's very important to learn and understand. And that was something that came to me from my initial teacher training, which was quite groundbreaking, because that initially is what people generally think of it as being. And I guess the ancient teachings of yoga speak to this eightfold path. So it's kind of, I guess, steps, or the rule book of how you would get to enlightenment, which is, I know people joke about it, and, you have the ohms and the funny hand symbols, and all of a sudden you're enlightened. But it was never to say that we would get there. It was to say that this is the journey and the steps that you take in order to try. So the physical practice itself, was only ever actually there to be able to get the body supple, to get it to be able to move, to be able to act, well, not to move, but to actually be flexible enough so that you could sit and be still and actually get into meditation. And that would be the next stage. And so it went from the physical practice to breath work to meditation to concentration to self-study to withdrawal of the senses. So it turns, as you go higher up the path, it turns to a more inward study or an inward journey, I guess. And it's seeing that from all of these steps and truly knowing yourself, and to get to a space where you can just totally be exactly where you are, as you are, all that you are, that's the space where you relieve suffering. There's a part in one of the ancient texts that's quite up front at the beginning, and it talks to how yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. And that's pretty much seen as one of the most fundamental teachings of all. So it's this eightfold path that's designed to bring you towards enlightenment. The most authentic teachers, I think, come from a place where what they offer is what resonates best with them. So what's so much more powerful in their own practice, and that's where I try and come from. Obviously, for me, meditation and mindfulness have been such a big part of my journey and my experience, and the tools that I have found so impactful in terms of getting me to where I am. To give a bit of background behind that, as part of the teacher training that I did, we had to undergo an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course. So we trained in what was called the mindful yoga method at the time, and it was as a result of that I found that mindfulness and the weaving of mindfulness within the yoga, the physical practice, that was the game changer for me. And that's where I found the most benefit from the practice. So in terms of how the class is set up, you might have someone who is very physically or anatomically based. So they might say sequence to a specific area of the body. Like today might be the hips day, or, things like that. You might have someone who weaves in very much the philosophical theme. So say, at the beginning of that eightfold path, we have what's called the yamas and the niyamas, which are pretty much the rule book for how to live your life. So things like non-stealing, things like truth, non-violence, things like that. So you might start to weave topics or elements of that into your class. Or it might be just that you are totally physically present, mind, body, heart, with all that's going on, the sensations of the body, the sensations of the breath, and using those mindfulness tools as anchors, as a way to keep that presence as you move through the practice, as you move and as you breathe. And that for me is where I find, and as a teacher starting out, you dip in and out to all these different areas as you're finding your voice and your own style of teaching. But I always know that when I teach in those other ways, that I feel like the class has been an absolute disaster. Because I'm trying to copy someone else and it's not me. And, other people, they speak very much to the energetics, which is something that I resonate with also. But for me, the most powerful is that sense of just being here and being and breathing with what's here right now, and using that as a way to fully be present in your body, in your mind, and your heart. I think I've been going all around the circles for your questions.
No, they're perfect. But if we want to bring meditation and yoga practices into our daily lives and do them at home every single morning as part of our routine, there are apps after apps when it comes to meditation. And for someone starting out, where would you guide them?
Yeah, meditation and yoga too. amazing, similar to social media. It's amazing how accessible things are now, but it can be really confronting or really
Confusing,
overwhelming for people. So there are some apps which are really, really great in terms of the filters that they've got on them. First of all, I think there's enough free apps that are out there to get you started. Also just to trial out and see what works for you. A lot of this stuff is trial and error. As I said, what works for one person absolutely doesn't work for the other. But some of these apps, one that I use specifically, which I've found amazing, is one called Insight Timer, and that's free. And what's really great about that is the filters that are offered to you are very personalized. So it's like, how long have you got? So that's always a really great starting point. You know yourself if you've got 5 minutes to sit down or if you've got 25. Usually if you're starting out of meditation, you start small, and you build from there. But you might always stay as 10 minutes. That might be enough for you. But also it will ask you things like, okay, so what time of day is it? Is it something that you're looking for to get to sleep? Is it the morning? The types of meditation might be quite different that are offered there. You might have experienced something before, like, there are so many different types of meditations, as you said. There is, say, mindfulness meditation, which I find the most powerful because often they're anchored, they are always anchored to things that are already here and are accessible, like things like your breath, things like your physical body and the sensations that you have here. But for some people, things like visualizations might be more powerful because that might be how your brain operates and works. For other people, visualizations might be really challenging, or that you might find it too heady for you and you need to ground. So that's why the filters, I think, are really great because it's almost a mindfulness practice in itself because it's asking you to check in and see, okay, what is it that I really need right now? And how do I best serve and best support that? So, that's, I guess, how you would do and just filter through. And
I have been using Insight Timer. I think it's an amazing app.
Yeah.
And I've gone from a guided meditation, which is someone obviously speaking you through all of the visualizations, and now I've ended up preferring more sound-based, just to quiet the mind. But I think it was a nice sort of learning curve for me to start with a guided and then move into a more sound-based. And like you said, it's such a personal experience, but so powerful. And I just have found myself over time wanting to do it more and more and more and more and more because 5 minutes is great, but then you just sort of want to spend more time in it because you can see how beneficial it is to your whole body and your whole mindset, and just what comes from taking that time to yourself to just still yourself. I mean, I'm a very energetic person. I tend to run back and forth, and I've got 2 kids and I'm so busy and there's lots going on, but just that even if it's 5, 10, 15 minutes to yourself in silence is critical to happiness and calm in our lives.
Yeah, and I think a really important thing to touch on is that it's not always going to be calm when you sit down for that 5-10 minutes. It actually might be the most challenging thing that you actually do all day because we don't take that time to sit with ourselves, and it's when we do find that time and that space, that's when naturally, as it does, as the mind was always meant to do, it wanders and it can drive you so crazy, to the point where you're like, what am I even doing? I thought this was meant to calm me. That's not the point of it. And I think that's something when I find when I'm teaching students, there's what you hear so often is probably the number one catch cry is, I can't get my mind to shut up. And that's not the point. It's about a meeting what's there, but also this attitude of real kindness. And allowing for what's here because it's here, you know, and what's the point in pushing it away because that just takes you so far down that journey of, one thought to the next, to the next, to the next.
And what you resist persists.
Totally,
right?
totally.
It took me a long time to understand that.
Yes, exactly. There's actually a mentor of mine, Marika Knight, she shared this quote recently and it spoke to how what we resist pursues us, but what we allow transforms us. And I think that just really hit the nail on the head for me there because particularly say with meditation, when you have that allowing space of just showing up, just no expectation, just meeting yourself as you are, all of the imperfections, you know, that we have for ourselves, all of the thoughts, all of the stories, and we can just hold space for that. It's in that's absolutely where the true transformation happens. You know?
I love that people are talking about this more these days. And you always, I mean, in the couple of times that I've met you and through the work that you do have wonderful, deep conversations. And it's so refreshing, because surface level stuff only is entertaining for a short period of time. So you've started these events. They're called Conscious Collaborations, and they're quite powerful, and you link like-minded women together in a room, which is similar to something that I've started doing as well. And I think it's so important to build a community, to have these deep conversations, to have that support around you when you're going through a transformative period in your life. Tell me about the Conscious Collaboration events that you're running and why you do them.
I guess coming, as we kind of touched on a little bit earlier on, I've come from a very corporate background. So I basically got myself through uni and a degree that I did in marketing into marketing, events, sponsorships and media. So I was working in that for close to 10 years. And as I said, well, actually throughout that period, towards the end, that's actually when I started working and diving more into yoga and did that teacher training. So for a little while, I'd love to say that had been a yoga teacher, you know, all the way through, but it hadn't been that way. I found myself double lifing for quite a bit of time, for a few years actually. And I would be Aisling, the almost suit wearing, you know, high-flying corporate by day, and then I'd be the yogi with the hands together singing Kumbaya at night time, and trying to figure out where I fit within both. And I guess the more and more that this yoga and meditation well-being side, particularly connection's the most important thing for me, the more that was making sense, the less the corporate side was making sense for me anymore. And it, as a lot of stories I've since heard happen, took for a trip to the doctor's office where I had some blood tests done, and found that the way I'd been feeling for quite a long time hadn't been as a result of anything that was just in my head. It was actually written there in black and white. I was on my way to burnout, basically, and adrenal fatigue and all of the wonderful things that go with that. But in terms of that, it was a blessing in disguise, really, because it was the first time that it was really shown to me all that I had already been thinking in terms of wanting to leave the corporate space and move, or change in some way, you know, make a big change, because I felt I was hungry for that subconsciously. But seeing this was really in black and white. You need to change something here. And what happened was then I started reaching out to people in the wellness space, and knowing that I didn't necessarily want to teach yoga and meditation full time, I wanted to just pick their brains and connect and, you know, listen to their stories and see how they did it, or, you know, how their path unfolded. And every time I'd meet, I'd leave and I'd be so excited and so on cloud nine and energized, and all of these amazing creative ideas would just flow. And it's funny because I'd often ring my now husband afterwards, and there's one specific occasion I remember, and I was just elated and called him and he didn't answer, and I left him a voicemail. And it made zero sense. And I hung up and I actually texted him and I was like, please don't listen to that voicemail.
I'm just downloading on you.
Exactly. But that's what would happen. And it wasn't any concrete opportunities were ever given, but it was just enough to make me see, okay, I'm really heading in the right direction here. This is my path. And I left, and my mentor, as I said, Marika, she was doing a teacher training, and that was enough that I could see, okay, that actually is potential for where I might want to go career-wise, particularly down the mindfulness route, because it marries both my professional and corporate career with also my experience that I've got. So I left my job and started that teacher training, and what was really interesting was so many people started reaching out to me, and I found that so bizarre because I was like, I'm still finding my way. I have no clue what I'm doing. Why do you want to meet me? And I was hearing all the same stories. I'm burnt out. I want to make a difference. I want to do good things in the world. And can we just chat, go for a walk or go for a coffee or a wine? So started doing that. And the amazing thing was that I'd have that same feeling. I'd be so excited and the ideas would be flowing and bouncing, and I realized that it wasn't because we were speaking about me at all. It was because we were connecting on that level and having that space where the walls come down and the heart bursts open, and you have those more deep and meaningful conversations rather than that surface level stuff that we all seem to get ourselves so tied in. And it's actually there where some really magical things can happen. And so I thought to myself, imagine we had a whole room full of those people. What kind of profound things could be born from that? And that's how, I guess, Conscious Collaborations was born. It started off with just some friends and close people that I knew. And we had actually Marika, she came and she spoke, and that's the first part of the evening. And then the second part is we have this section which I call Speed Connections. And I'm very conscious of not likening it to networking, because I feel, for me, the energy and the intention that's behind that often, and not always, absolutely not, but often can be a what's in it for me. Whether this is more about the connection between two individuals, and whatever comes from that comes from that. And I think we're so isolated as entrepreneurs, as individuals in this space. We're also so isolated as human beings. We're more connected than ever, but we are so very disconnected to ourselves and each other. That to have that space where you have those one-on-one conversations is so impactful and so important in the world we live in now. So one led into two events led into three, and now we're coming up to our fourth, and the feedback has just been amazing, and people that are just hungry for more. And it's not the space, it's actually the connection. And that's what people, I guess, are starting to realize. So exciting things hopefully to come as we dive more and more into it.
I think you're right. People are really yearning for that connection, and just those soulful conversations that there's no barriers. You can talk about whatever is lighting you up or what is not lighting you up, the complete opposite. Or you can talk about, these wild dreams and ideas that you've got that you've never actually verbalized to anyone. And then there's people there who might be able to help you on your way or just give you the support you need. So I think that is so powerful, and it's such an amazing thing that you're doing. And where can people find out about these events that you're running?
Yeah, we've got a website, so it's consciouscollaborations.com.au, and we're also on Instagram, and we're starting to build Facebook, one thing at a time.
There's so many avenues, right?
Yeah. So sign up to our mailing list on the website, and you can be first to hear more.
Good on you. Now, I want to give our listeners a little bit of a treat today. We're already calm from listening to you, but I would love you to run a 10-minute meditation. Yeah. So if you're listening to this, or driving, please maybe save this part for when you're not driving. It can be quite dangerous. And settle yourself into a little bit of a comfortable state, and enjoy the peacefulness that will come from Aisling's sharings. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. Thank you. Also, as Maritza said, just making your way into a space where you can sit comfortably for the next few minutes. If you're sitting up in a chair, or, if you've got the car parked, you might uncross the legs, firmly place the feet on the ground. We want to find an alert posture, so you might lengthen the spine a little more by lifting the crown of the head subtly. And from there, if it's comfortable for you, you might close down the eyes, or you might just avert the gaze. And taking a few conscious deep breaths in and out of the nose. just to allow yourself to really settle in. This might be the first time today where you found time or space to actually stop and be still. Fully embracing that space now as you fully be here. And finding 3 deep conscious breaths in through the nose and out through the nose. We'll take 2 more like that. Inhale. And let it go. 1 more, breathe in. Exhale. Just noting how this act of awareness, of conscious awareness, can begin to settle the body. And the breath maybe perhaps grows a little longer, a little deeper. How some parts of the body might soften just a little, maybe find some space. I'm starting to notice the actual sensations of the body as it breathes, where maybe the breath feels most vivid for you. That might be a gentle rise and fall of the belly. Maybe it's the lift and drawing in of the rib cage or the shoulder blades, the collarbones. Maybe it's even the entry point and that exit point right at the tip of the nostrils as you watch the air coming in and then watching it again as it leaves. Wherever it is that the breath feels most vivid for you here, just dropping your awareness into that space now. Space to watch, to observe, to witness all that's here. And from there you might begin to notice the physical body. So the sensations that you feel not only of the breath, but where there's maybe tension or tightness. Where maybe feels a little more fluid, a little more easeful, effortless. Noting the features of the face, the muscles around the jaw, the space behind the eyes. And if there is tension, perhaps you might invite a little more space, softening. Noting the space at the neck or the shoulders, the space where we traditionally hold quite a lot of our tension or our stress. There might be room for some space, but there might not. Rather than building the stories around it, can you just make space for what's here? If you find yourself getting caught up in the storyline, perhaps it might be helpful to ask, what else is here? What else can I experience? And traveling down into the hips, into the legs. The sense of weight or grounding as you feel the whole physical body in your seat. The sense of being supported, of being held as you meet the chair below you and it meets you right back. And taking that element of grounding now, right, as you feel the soles of the feet. The left and the right sole as it meets the earth. Supported, held, fully here. just as you are, all that you are. You might find that the mind might wander, as minds do and as are designed to do. There might be thoughts. Perhaps you notice yourself getting a little more preoccupied by what might be yet to come in your day or what might have already been. And if that happens, can you find this gentle kindness as an intention as you invite it back to what's here? The breath, the physical body. And dropping back into the sensations of the breath. That point at the tip of the nose, or maybe the sense of the entire body breathing. Just resting here for a few more conscious rounds of breath. As you're ready now, begin to deepen the breath. Let it grow a little longer, a little deeper in its expression as it draws from the inside out. Find some gentle movements, perhaps brush the thumbs over the tips of the fingers. A gentle wiggling of the toes, or sway left or right with the head. And as you're ready and as it feels okay for you, beginning to blink the eyes open and come back.
Oh, so peaceful. Thank you, Aisling Quigley, for being on the show. I hope you all enjoyed that 10 minutes of peacefulness in your life. To find more about Aisling, you can visit her at www.aislingquigley.com.au. And I'd love to hear from all of our listeners, so let's keep the conversation going and let us know what you thought of this episode. You can find me on Instagram at Things You Can't Unhear, and also at Maritza_Barone. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show, leave us a rating and review, and remember, be happy, be healthy, be conscious, and be kind.